All right, and we're off. So, welcome back to another episode of Day One Radio Podcast. I am on the road right now. My brother and co-host Maurice is not with me, but I'm here with a guest that we have both said that we wanted to have on the podcast since we started a little over almost 5 years ago. So sitting here in the Bay Area with A&R extraordinaire, manager extraordinaire, and probably one of the most unsung people in the music industry, Atron Gregory, who's also a friend of my cousin, but we'll get into that later. So how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me, man. Definitely appreciate it. So let's start, because I feel like people know the name, but they don't really know you. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, where you were raised, all of that stuff.
I was raised in the Bay Area. I went to school in Richmond, California, Adams Junior High.
Okay.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
Cutting. Everyone who knows the Bay Area knows Kennedy.
Most definitely.
I went to San Francisco State University, and then after that I moved down to L.A. and started my career in the music business via a couple pit stops, working as a janitor at ABC television. Wow. And sleeping in my car and in the park and whatever I had to do to survive during that time period, right? Not too long before I met your cousin Lonzo.
Yeah, the grind.
Yes.
The grind. So what was it that made you think, especially back then, because my father managed bands and stuff like that. He still works, in the music industry to an extent, that it wasn't like a viable thing. Like I'm going to manage bands or I'm going to work at a record label. That wasn't something that people just thought could be easily done. What was it for you that made you want to do that?
Well, there are two things. One thing I didn't mention before I moved to L.A., I was a road manager for Rodney Franklin, who was pretty much a childhood friend of mine, and he was a virtuoso keyboardist. And I had the opportunity to be a road manager, to travel around the country, go to record companies, see that there was a viable business in the music industry. And I just got very fortunate. At 18 years old, he got signed to a record company, which was Columbia at the time, long before it was Sony and bought out by the Japanese. And so I had an opportunity to see a lot during that time period. We traveled to L.A. a lot. We we're in studios with some of the greatest artists of that time period, and I just saw it. And then the other thing I did was I read a book.
Which book?
It was about Berry Gordy. What other book can a black man read during that time period?
Exactly.
It was one of the many books about Berry Gordy, and it made me want to be in the music business.
So you just kind of really, your boy gets a deal. That's how a lot of us get into the situations we get into. For sure.
Yeah, so he got a deal, and so what happened when he got his deal at first, and back then there was a lot of tour promotion going on. Record companies did a lot of that. I don't know if they do so much of that anymore.
Right.
But back then they really did a lot of tour support, financed the touring of artists. So they did that. They had a person from the record company to go on the road with them. But once that stopped, that employee didn't work with Rodney anymore. So Rodney needed a tour manager, and Rodney said, "Do you want to go out on the road with me?" And I'm like, "Sure." I asked him, "What do I do?" He's like, "I don't know. Let's just go." So we went, and that's how it started.
And we're definitely gonna get into how the hell you went from being a tour manager for your homeboy to tour managing NWA. I'm sure that was night and day.
it was a little different. It was a little different.
We're gonna get into that for sure. Super random question. Have you ever done radio at any point? Because you have like that voiceover radio
it's
voice.
Interesting. A lot of people said I have that voice, but I've never done it.
Man, you might be sitting on millions from voiceovers, man. That you haven't. That might be another career trajectory at some point.
It would be nice to be able to sit in the mic, at least for a couple hours every day. All day, I don't know about, but a couple hours every day might be fun.
Definitely. So you go to L.A. and you're just figuring it out. How do you end up meeting up with Lonzo and doing the whole World Class Wreckin Cru thing on the business side, and how does that translate into you being tour manager for NWA?
So ironically, as Rodney's record career started to decline, he ended up with a manager by the name of Jerry Heller.
Wow.
And so I knew two people in the music business. One was Rodney's former manager, Al Evers, who I still work with today, and Jerry Heller. But Al Evers was and is in the Bay Area, and Jerry Heller was in L.A., so I called Jerry and said, hey, I'm here in L.A., do you know anybody? And he said, well, you know, you can hook up with my boy Lonzo. And so I connected with Lonzo, and, you know, we just started from there.
Now, for those who are listening who are not of the age that I am, if you don't know who Jerry Heller is, Jerry Heller ran Ruthless Records alongside Eazy-E, but was a long-time record industry guy. And Lonzo, a.k.a. Alonzo Williams, is the guy who founded World Class Wreckin Cru and ran a lot of clubs in L.A. and parties in L.A., which begat NWA, Dr. Dre, the whole nine. So for you, being that you were really just doing whatever you had to do to pay the bills and stay afloat.
You have no idea.
Well, I mean, if you say you were a janitor at ABC, you slept in parks sometimes, slept in cars sometimes, I'm sure, you know, it was tough. I'm sure it became a struggle. So how did you kind of keep your focus and keep yourself motivated until that break came?
Quite honestly, during that time period, when you're young, when you're in your early 20s, that's not really a struggle. That's just
you don't know it's a struggle.
You don't even look at it as a struggle. It's just like, oh, I had to go to sleep and I had to get up and I had to go to the next day. You don't really look at the hardship of, you know, I had a car. A lot of people didn't have a car, so I had a car to sleep in. And I also was a martial artist during that time period. So our organization, the way they're set up, if there's a martial arts studio in the city where you are, you have somewhere to sleep.
Oh, that's a blessing.
So I slept on the floor of the martial arts studio at night. So, you know, between that, my car, the park was really more because there was a time period where I was working graveyard security, and my martial arts instructor's like, classes at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get off till 8 o'clock, so I was tired.
Right.
So I wasn't trying to go work out. I was trying to sleep.
That's true.
And so, but yeah, you don't really think about it. You just have a goal in mind, something you're trying to do, and you do what you have to do to get there. You don't think about anything else. You just are pretty laser focused at your goals or your dreams or the things that you're interested in doing.
Definitely. So you speak to Jerry Heller. Jerry Heller introduces you to Lonzo. So what happened? And this is, I'm assuming, if Lonzo and Heller know each other, this is the time that he's getting records pressed up for World Class Wreckin Cru and whatnot, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what happens with Lonzo? You guys, because Lonzo will be on the show sometime soon. Lonzo is the personality is a lot.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how did you guys hook up and how did you click and how did that thing turn into a business and you working with World Class Wreckin Cru?
So the interesting thing is, so Jerry hooked me up with Lonzo. I went and talked to Lonzo. Not too long before that, my uncle flew into L.A., and back then, he just had a layover, like a 3-hour layover. Back then, you could go through the airport and sit at the gate and talk to people. So I went and hung out with my uncle for a couple hours at his gate. And I just told him, you know, I'm interested in getting in a certain type of business. What do I do? He said, volunteer. So I went to Lonzo and said, hey, man, I'll work for you for free. And that's what I did. I worked for Lonzo for free. I started doing his books for the records that were being pressed up. You know, how many records they pressed, how much they cost, how many they sent out, how much money was supposed to come back, all that type of stuff, bookkeeping type of stuff. And, you know, we hung for a couple months like that. He gave me lunch. He gave me, you know, a bologna sandwich.
Right.
But hey, I was grateful to eat.
Yeah.
And then he said, you know what, man, I like what you do. And if you can make me money, for every dollar that comes in, you get 20 cents. And, you know, those dollars turn into hundreds, and those hundreds turn into thousands, and just kind of went from there. Then, and Lonzo will tell you this story also, that when Eazy-E came into the picture and Jerry Heller started getting with the Eazy-E, all the people that Jerry was working with at the time, which was Lonzo, LA Dream Team, Egyptian Lover, Unknown DJ, that whole group, that whole LA clique, all the groups were perturbed, and they were just saying to Jerry, if you're going to spend all this time with Eazy, then you don't need to be bothered with us. And so one of the things that happened was Jerry went to Lonzo myself and said to us, why don't you have Atron co-manage you? And so I ended up co-managing the World Class Wreckin Cru with Dr. Dre, DJ Yella, Clientele, and Lonzo. So that's, how everything came about. And I ended up touring with, I was their tour manager first.
Right.
And then I ended up co-managing the World Class Wreckin Cru with Jerry.
That's wild, man. That's super stumbling into a situation for sure. Yeah, and obviously you gained a rapport with those guys during the time. So how did that in turn translate into you being tour manager for NWA? Because I don't think a lot of people understand how small that industry was back then.
Yeah, I mean, back then in L.A., it was just a small group of us.
Yeah.
Doing what we were doing. There was, a couple places where you could get records pressed. There was Macola, where you could get them pressed for free. Mm. They sent some out the back door. That's a different day, a different conversation for a different day. And there was Rainbow, where you had to pay as you go.
Right.
So for a lot of us, it was going to Macola because you didn't have to pay as you go at Macola. But what happened as the World Class Wreckin Cru started breaking up and Ruthless started forming, I had a rapport with everybody, and Jerry, Eazy, Dre, Lonzo. Then there was a girl group that Arabian Prince produced called JJ Fad.
Yeah.
And it was done, I believe, on Unknown DJ's record label originally.
I believe so.
And somehow Eazy and Jerry worked it out where they bought the song and the record from Unknown. Supersonic. And so then they went to get a deal with that record. That record blew up, and they needed a tour manager. And I moved over and started working with Ruthless at that time. Is
it safe to say that pretty much the success of Supersonic funded what would become NWA?
Absolutely. It I don't know if it necessarily funded NWA, but it gave once you have a hit record, now everyone's listening to you.
Okay.
And Dre was, even though Arabian produced the record, for whatever reason, Dre's phenomena, I think what it was there was a big record, Supersonic, but there was this underground record. And it was NWA and the Posse.
Yep.
It's the first NWA record.
Yep.
And there was this underground record, and it was brewing all around the country. And so as that was growing, as JJ Fad was big, that was growing. And what happens when you have a big record, on a label like Ruthless, and you have another record coming behind it, all of a sudden everyone wants to know about that.
True.
But no one really wanted to touch it because it was so, against the grain of what everyone, it was the beginning of what we call gangster rap. Yeah. So, it was totally against the grain. You got to think the records that were coming out of L.A. at the time were Dream Team, Wreckin' Cru, Egyptian
Electro
Lover.
Type stuff.
Yeah. So, and then the New York stuff was completely different. Even though there was some pretty hard New York records, they weren't looked at the same way because L.A. and New York were just such different places.
Right.
And so what happens is, that inertia that Supersonic created, it just automatically went to NWA, and then it just went from there.
That's amazing. No, you said that you were studying martial arts before then. How did that whole thing? So I see this huge trophy behind you. So clearly you were very good and are very good.
That trophy is actually one of my students' trophies.
Oh, okay, got you.
And I don't teach anymore, but that was one of my students' trophies. She gave me that when she won grand championship.
Wow,
that's
so
a teenager.
You out here teaching grand champions.
Oh, absolutely.
How did you gain interest in martial arts?
Well, my brother, who also helped me gain interest in the music industry early on. I didn't really go way back to elementary school and 5 and 6 years old, but my brother started martial arts, and my brother's 10 years older than me, so pretty much anything that he was involved in he thought might be good for me, he just took me there. So when it was a summer between 7th and 8th grade, and I started doing martial arts back then. My brother had been doing it for probably about 6 months prior to then. It was summertime. So he took me to class with him. And that's how I started.
Wow. So did you transition into tour managing NWA? Now we've seen and read all kind of stuff around those guys and the tours. How often did you have to utilize those skills out on the road with NWA?
Well, ironically, those skills got utilized prior to NWA.
Okay.
Because I was a tour manager for JJ Fad.
Right.
I was a tour manager for Michelle A.
Right.
The DLC did a few shows, but when he was supposed to go on his tour, he had that bad car accident.
Right.
But with JJ Fad and Michelle A, I was the only one out there.
Oh,
so
wow.
I did the books. I was security at one point. I mean, there was a time period where Biscuit and some other people were out there too, but early on when there wasn't enough money to bring other people, then it was just me. So it was great for me because I had two skills. Yeah. So that's how it made it easy for me to get work. But with NWA, we had security. So I had security. There was someone because I had the money. So I had a guy by the name of KJ. He was with me all day, every day.
Got you.
Yeah. So by the time I hit the NWA tour, there weren't, like I said, I had security at that point.
You were good.
Yeah.
You were good. History and sometimes revisionist history has really painted Ruthless Records out to be like this notorious record label or whatnot. Is that do you agree with that, or do you think people put a lot on it?
I don't pay attention to that, so you have to explain to me what you mean by notorious record label. I know
it as like they did shady business and yada yada yada. But if you were doing books, then you know what the business was more so than a lot of other people do.
Yeah, so the record business is a tough business.
True.
It's a very tough game, and contracts are contracts. And when someone signs a contract, you go by the letter of the contract. It might not be the fairest contract in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just anyone will tell you that's had any success in the record business. Their first record contract is terrible.
Yeah.
Why is it terrible? Because people take risks. There's companies that take risks. There's individuals that take risks, financial risks, for someone else's career. So you're not going to get the best contract. It's just very rare that's going to happen. If you have success, your second contract's going to be a lot better. If you continue to have success, your third contract will be even better. You continue, you make it 20, 25 years and lucky to get another contract, you might be running a company.
Right.
But your initial contract's not going to be that good. So people will say there was shady business that was run. What it was, they lived by the letter of the contract that probably wasn't the greatest contract for all the guys' first contracts. Really, really that simple. Not it probably wasn't. It wasn't the greatest contract for the guys' first contracts.
Right. So it's like you can't even, when you saw Cube leaving because he had issues with the contract and then subsequently Dre leaves, it's like you can't even really be mad at these guys. Like they're young and you signed it, but at the same time, like you have a bone to pick.
Yeah, well, I think that in the movie Straight Outta Compton, one of the most telling moments in that movie for me was when Dre came in to the studio. It was just him and Eazy. He had the contract in hand. He threw the contract on the mixing board and said, "I thought we were brothers." And, that's the most telling part because it wasn't a 50-50 deal, was it? And I don't know what discussion they may have had, just the two of them. I'm not privy to that. Right. But I am privy to what the contracts were. I am privy to how the deals were done. And, I can understand that statement, based on what he may have thought in his mind.
Right.
And I don't know specifically what their conversations were. I have no idea.
Right. Now, you have this experience and you end up launching TNT. Was being on the road and doing all of these things, like you said, you were doing multiple jobs, so you knew how to do a lot of stuff. Is that what prompted you to say, hey, I need to just start my own company?
So I probably never told anyone this on the air, and I don't even know why I'm telling you. But whatever, I'll be able to say it again. And I have a book that I'm writing right now with Gail Mitchell, who is the hip hop and R&B editor of Billboard magazine.
Nice.
So she's helping me write my book. But I was at dinner with Jerry and their accountant, and they were discussing, it was year end, and they were discussing the money they had to give to the IRS. And it was a lot of money. They were making a lot of money. They were making a lot of money in today's standards.
Wow.
Okay. so they were making, and Jerry went to the restroom, and I asked the accountant, I'm like, if I would have got a bonus, a bigger bonus, because I did get a bonus at the end of the year, but if I would have got a bigger bonus, would that have negatively impacted their IRS, the money they had to give the IRS? And they told me no. I mean, the accountant told me no. And I was like, wow, why are you giving the money to the IRS? And I'm supposed to be the second man or the third person here at Ruthless.
Wow.
At that time, it was Eazy, Jerry, and then me at that time. Gary Ballin, Jerry's nephew, was there too. And after I left, he was probably the third person. But at that time, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of money to give to the IRS. I could have used that money. Now, granted, when I wanted to buy a house, they loaned me money to buy a house. When I, at the end of the year, I got bonuses. So, I wasn't unhappy, but I was like, that's a lot of money that could have gone in my pocket and not the IRS's pocket. Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? I was going to bring Digital Underground to Ruthless.
Wow.
But, I was like, well, I guess it's time for me to start my own company. And actually, Rodney and I originally started together, but he faded out, and I kept it going.
Is it true that you started TNT with just $5,000?
I started TNT with $1,500.
Wow.
Yeah, $1,500.
That's wild. So
of the money, and I was still working on the road to support TNT and my own bills while I was starting it, while it was growing.
Got you. So you mentioned Digital Underground, and I've talked to Money B, and we've had one on the show, just about the history of the group and everything. And obviously, a lot of people think Shock is from the Bay, but Shock is from Florida and then moved here.
Shock's actually from New York,
Florida,
and
then Tampa Bay, and
then the Bay. Yes.
Then here.
Yeah.
So, how did you first encounter Shock? And the group started off with Shock and just Shopmaster Jay, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, how did you encounter them, and what was it about those guys that made you think, "Oh, like this could work"?
So when I was thinking about looking for groups on my own, I know I wanted something different.
Okay.
And ironically, Shopmaster Jay knew Rodney Franklin, who was the first person I started
Everything
with.
comes back to Rodney.
It comes back full circle, man. It absolutely comes back full circle. And so Rodney knew I was into hip hop, and so he knew nothing about hip hop. He was a jazz musician. Didn't care about hip hop. It was just some music form that probably wasn't going to last, as far as a lot of people were concerned back then. So Rodney called me and said, hey, I want you to meet this guy. And they got on a bus and came down to, because I was in L.A. at the time, came down to L.A. and we had lunch at a Thai place on Victory. I'm trying to remember the exact streets. On Victory in North Hollywood. I can't remember the cross street. And they played me the music, and I loved it. It was Underwater Rhymes and Your Life's a Cartoon. And I think, I want to say Hip Hop Dial, but I'm not sure about that. But definitely Underwater Rhymes and Your Life's a Cartoon. And I just loved it. It was something unique, different. No one else was doing anything like that at the time. I'm like, I want to do this. And that's how it started.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't understand just how impactful Digital Underground was to the culture. Like, that's obviously you had Run DMC, LL, and all of that, but I feel like Sex Packets was the first hip hop album that people knew the date it was coming out.
Yeah,
and record stores opened at midnight the night before for people to buy. Like, I had never heard of that.
I totally forgot about that. You're right.
I had never heard of that before,
right.
And I don't know if it was just in the Bay because they were here. Because obviously I was a kid, but I remember, I think it was like Leopold's Tower Record.
Yeah,
like I had never heard of that before.
Yeah. I mean, Leopold's was instrumental in us having success because it was Leopold's and KSOL that supported us.
Yeah.
And without either one of them, Digital Underground wouldn't have happened. I mean, I shouldn't say wouldn't have happened because you never know. Maybe in another way it could have happened. But Leopold's and KSOL was absolutely instrumental in our success.
It's amazing, man. I know that we just had the 25-year anniversary a couple years ago of Sex Packets, and there were several hits after Sex Packets as well.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
2 years from now, 2020 is the 30th anniversary, and I know that guys are all over the place. Do you actually think that maybe we'll get new music or at least a real tour to celebrate this album?
Well, we've been talking about a tour.
Okay.
In 2020. I don't know whether it will happen or not. Hasn't been a lot of conversation about it this year, but 2019 is quickly approaching, and the idea was to start preparing at the top of 2019, and guys start talking about how they wanted the show to be and start looking at, talking with the agents to see what was possible. I don't know. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but it's been the talk for several years that we were going to do that.
I feel like people need that. I see all of these legends of hip hop tours and things of that nature, and they're great. And it's a lot of people that I've seen do club shows, and I'm like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. But then they get out in front of 7,000 people, and the energy's ramped up, and it's just an amazing show.
Sure.
So I would love to see that from DU. I feel like, and tell me, because you're far closer to the situation I was, why do you think it is that this group, with all these hits, with groundbreaking situations, that they don't get celebrated in hip-hop like a lot of other groups and artists that haven't done half as much?
I think it's a certain level of promotion that goes into it, and we're not, as a group, we're not the type to blow our own horns. We like history to show itself through our actions, not necessarily for us hiring a PR rep and I'm not saying people do that. I don't know what people do. Shock is not on social media at all. He does not particularly like social media. Money B's on social media. I have 800 followers.
Right. Low key, very low key people.
And we just do our thing. Money B and Young Hump, they do shows. And they do all the Digital Underground hits, but it's not the same as a collective. But
right.
The show is good. I mean, I've watched it, and it is good. But it's not. Mud will tell you, be the first person to say it's not the same as everybody on stage together. But like I said, the show is good, so he's keeping it alive doing that. Shock's doing a lot of different stuff. A deal just came across my desk for him once this interview is over, after email him and see if he wants to do it. He gets work to do different things because he's a musician. He's not just a rapper. He's a producer musician, so he gets work that you don't see. Whether it's tech companies or this situation, it's there's an NDA I haven't signed yet, so I guess I shouldn't talk about
don't
it.
say anything. We do not want to mess up the money.
I just printed out the NDA right before you walked in, but I didn't get a chance to sign it and send it back out. So, but yeah, so I don't know that, but it's in the music. You take Humpty Dance as an example. It is the most sampled hip hop song in history.
Wow.
But a lot of people don't know that. But the producers do. The people who sample it do. Our royalty department knows.
Yeah, I bet you do.
But a lot of people don't know that about that song.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I like that on and you said you have 800 followers, but I like on your Instagram how it's basically like a treasure trove of history.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really dope. I definitely appreciate that. One of the other things, aside from Humpty Dance and so many other Kiss You Back, so many other hits, obviously Digital Underground is known for introducing the world to Tupac Shakur.
Sure.
Taking it back, what were your real, honest initial thoughts when they first brought the Strictly Dope demo to you and you heard Pac for the first time?
I heard him prior to that.
Okay.
Because I signed him before there was a Strictly Dope demo.
Wow. I didn't know that.
The only thing I signed, we signed Tupac and Strictly Dope, and we didn't know we were signing Strictly Dope initially. We knew we were going to sign Tupac. So what happened was, during that time, we were having a lot of success. We were getting deals for different groups. A lot of things were going on. And so the rule kind of Shock and I had is if there's someone that I like, then they go to him. If he likes him also, then I'll sign him. If both of us don't like him, then if he likes him and I don't, we don't sign him. If I like him and he doesn't, we don't sign him.
Okay.
We've had some hits and misses, but the hits and misses are for various reasons. So what happened was Layla Steinberg sent me a videotape of Tupac, which I cannot find, of him performing in front of on the grass in front of the high school or somewhere. And I think it might have even been all the guys. I don't recall exactly. And I said, I really like this. And I said, let's set up an appointment to go to Starlight to see Shock in the studio. If Shock likes it, then we'll do a deal. And ironically, just talking about full circle, the way I met Layla Steinberg.
It's through Rodney Franklin.
No. Close though. JJ Fad.
Through JJ Fad, wow.
Because as tour manager with JJ Fad, she was doing shows in Santa Rosa. And so, she did such a great job for the show, and the girls really took care of us. I'm like, if you ever need anything, just call me. And she did.
Wow.
And so then Tupac went to audition for Shock. Tupac went to audition for Shock, and what was supposed to happen was Ray and Tupac were supposed to go.
Ray Love.
Ray Love's grandfather is Cab Calloway.
Yep.
And a lot of people, and so his dad wasn't interested in Ray being in this business because he knew so much about the business, probably good and bad. But he didn't want Ray, like any parent doesn't want their child to be involved in the bad things they know about. So Ray didn't go to that audition, just Tupac did. So Shock's like, I love him. But when it came time to sign, I signed 3 people, which was Ray, Diz, and Pac. Diz being the DJ. And then Shock was supposed to do demos, but Shock at the time was busy working on the record. So Chopmaster Jay did some demos. And then we tried to shop those demos around, didn't get any luck, then went back and worked on some more demos. And tried to shop those demos around, didn't get any luck.
Wow.
And then, so after that, I go to Pac and say, we might have to put this out independently like we did with Digital Underground. He was fine with it, but that meant no money because no advance. And so, I asked Shock to take Pac out on the road because, so he wouldn't leave and go do something else because, he needed to eat.
Right.
And I'd give him some money, but, I'm a small company. I don't have much money to pass around. So that's pretty much what happened.
So Pac goes on the road, dancing for Digital Underground, roadie for Digital Underground, being Pac, learning, being a young man on the road.
That's a little misnomer. Roadie, everyone carried bags. I carried bags, Shock carried.
Okay.
We all, everyone likes to say he was a roadie. He wasn't. He was a member of the crew.
Gotcha.
And everyone in the crew did everything, or whatever their roles were.
Gotcha.
Carrying. If I had to carry my bags.
Yeah.
Shock carried his own bags. Pac carried bags and helped with other people's bags and danced, and had a part rapping also.
Right.
In the show, yeah.
Definitely. Now, how did Same Song end up happening, going from that to Same Song? Because I don't even, and you tell me this, did you guys realize how much of a royal and regal introduction that video was for him?
Oh, or absolutely. We
like that was amazing. Like,
was it a planned royal introduction for him? Yes and no.
Okay.
It was a planned part, obviously, in the video. Did we look at it as a royal introduction for him necessarily? No, it was just a part he played, and that made sense for him to do it.
Right.
If that makes it
does. It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. So it wasn't like we're presenting Pac. It was like this was a perfect part, and this is how we should introduce him in that video. But it wasn't so much we're introducing Tupac Shakur to the world.
Yeah.
wasn't that type of thing.
It was,
but I should say it was planned, and that was my and I thought it all up, and it was my brainstorm. But no, it wasn't all that.
Definitely. Nah, that was an awesome video. Like, and that's a verse that everybody remembers word for word, almost from the day that it came out. If you guys are too young to know Same Song from Digital Underground, please go look that up. It's been on like 3 or 4 soundtracks since then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Complex said you were top 25 A&R of all time. And in the little synopsis they have of it, and they said, although Jimmy Iovine and Suge Knight eventually moved Gregory out of the picture by taking advantage of Shakur's insecurities and dangling beats from Dr. Dre as a bait. That's a lot of words. That's a very, like, poignant statement there.
Yeah.
Do you think, obviously because you were there, this is your life, do you think that's an accurate account of how you guys' working relationship ended, or is that hip-hop folklore, which a lot of that's
actually, because that guy interviewed me.
Okay.
So that was pretty close.
Okay.
The folklore is the bail.
Yes, we're going to get into
here's what I will tell you. We're not going to get into that too deep.
Okay.
That's one thing I don't talk about. I will talk about it, but I just don't generally talk about it. What I will tell you is it's folklore.
Okay.
And we'll leave it there.
Come on,
we'll leave it there till the right circumstance comes around for me to talk about
AKA when the book comes out. So, I mean, it's obvious if you guys have read The Big Payback, then it gets a little bit into it there to where the folklore of, Suge coming in with $1 million to bail Pac out of jail is not necessarily how it happened at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and we like I said, I do a hip hop trivia event every week, and that's actually been one of our trivia questions before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What really happened? I have the paperwork back there in the office.
Wow, you got to show it. We won't take a picture. I got to see that.
It's literally 100 pages because it's part of his whole. God, what is that called? When he was released from jail pending appeal, so it was I have the whole appeal package.
Wow.
And myself, maybe the lawyer, maybe the estate are the only 3 people that have it. If maybe I'm the only person that has it, I don't know. Right. I mean, I've never asked.
Got you. What do you remember the last conversation you and Pac had?
Absolutely, yeah.
Would you care to share? Is it too personal?
No, I mean, it was really very simple. It's like, do you want to call Sugar? I'll have someone else call him. Because I want to, when I get out, I want to sign with Suge because I want to do beats with Dre. I want to do songs with Dre and Snoop. That's the only way I can do it. You can go with me or you don't have to. It's up to you. And I'm like, I don't see why you have a #1 record in the country right now. You're in jail. I get that. I totally understand. We're working on that. But you have the #1 record in the country. Why do you need to go somewhere else and do something with someone else?
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
that's very tough. And the irony is that he really didn't even work with Dre like that over at Death Row.
Right, absolutely.
That's super tough. Obviously, you were portrayed in the movie. A lot of people have polarizing opinions on the movie. What did you think of All Eyes on Me, the film?
Gosh, I have so many thoughts. So my first thought is I'm glad a film was done.
100%.
My second thought is I'm happy for my Digital Underground family. My third thought is I wish there would have been a way where they could have included people in the process, the family, myself, a couple others, so they could really get a story opposed to a Wikipedia version of the Tupac Shakur story.
Wow.
Because I think it was a missed opportunity.
Do you think, I was discussing this with friends of mine when it came out, and I don't feel like this will be the only Tupac Shakur movie. I think Tupac is a big enough iconic figure that it has to be done right.
It's hard to say. There's so many factors that go into making movies. There's so many factors that go into getting rights. There's the factor that the movie only did $60 million.
Right.
Which, I say the word only, but if you think 10 years ago, $60 million on a black film is huge.
Yeah.
It's still pretty big now. But on a Tupac Shakur film, it seems like a failure, even though it really wasn't a failure. Think about this. On a film that someone that was extremely respected, extremely close to Tupac, Jada Pinkett, was thrashing at the time it came out.
Yeah.
And the fact that it didn't get the type of press that it should, everyone knew it was coming out. But he still had fans that spent $60 million to come watch it. Just think if it was a great film. It wasn't a terrible film, but think of it as a great film.
It didn't live up to the legacy.
Right, exactly.
It didn't. It was a lot of like you said, the Jada Pinkett thing, the whole John Singleton thing before it came out. It was a lot of it wasn't what Pac deserved, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I will say that. So you've been doing management for a long time, and I was going over, the website for TNT, and you guys have branched out into other, consulting for brands, sports.
That's funny. I forgot I had a TNT website out.
And hilarious. This guy is just working. What made you want to branch out into those areas, and what kind of things have you guys touched, you and your partners, with doing so?
So, as you go through this road of the entertainment business, you just run into people, meet people, and it's just kind of a natural progression. The actual website you should check out is prolificmedia.com.
I'm definitely going to ask you about that.
Okay, so that's kind of the one that I'm really actively working on now. So, our goal is to give opportunities to young artists. Mm-hmm. And if they, my thought is, and we've just revamped the website and we're ramping it back up again now. My thought is if, you have a lot of young artists and all of them, give them an opportunity to put their music up, to post, to give them an opportunity, be seen and be heard. Our motto is be seen, be heard, be you. Give them that opportunity, and say they have 3,000 followers or 4,000 or 5,000 followers. They don't have 60, 100, 500,000, millions of followers. But if you get all those guys to have an opportunity, and so, who knows who will come out of that, but if you have them from all over California, right now we're just doing California.
I saw that.
But from all over California, then, maybe one of the guys, fans from Coachella Valley, will see someone from Sacramento they like and start talking about it. Or maybe, vice versa, someone from Sacramento will see someone that they don't know about in L.A., and they'll start talking about them. So, my idea is to give people an opportunity. Doesn't cost a lot to put a website together. Doesn't cost a lot to, it costs something. But it doesn't cost a lot to have someone stay on top of it and pay attention to it for you and do some, we're doing $100 promotion. It's not a lot of money, but, that $100, that might help someone pay their phone bill that month.
Definitely.
And, we'll see what happens. So we're really working on that. I have a couple of artists that Jacob Lusk and Yoey composes. Jacob Lusk, that's why I was in L.A. He had a show at Spaghettini's, which is kind of, you can tell your people what Yoshi's is in the Bay Area, but Spaghettini's is kind of the Yoshi's of L.A.
Right.
And so he performed down there. That's why I went down there and did a little Facebook Live. So you can go on Facebook Live and see a little bit of his performance. Okay. I left up there. And we're just, trying to look for opportunities, try to give opportunities. It's a tough thing. I read the other day that 20,000 songs come out on Spotify every day. And so with Jacob as an example, I'm going to give a little plug. We're doing something that we're doing a video to one of his songs called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And it's going to focus on mental health, suicide prevention, a little pride, a little bit towards the pride community also. One, because I like to do things that are helpful. Two, you got to find a niche that's a little bit different than just putting a song out on Spotify. If you don't have several $100,000 to market and promote, you got to find other ways to do it. And I think, the video is almost done, and it's going to be very compelling. And ironically, and things just kind of fall the way they're supposed to fall. Ironically, the Association for Suicide Prevention has Out of the Darkness walks all around the country, and we just happen to have a song called "Don't Be Afraid of the Dark," and it just fits. It wasn't something that let's come. Well, it was something we like. Let's come up with ideas. Once we started looking around, it's like, wow. How ironic this actually fits.
The synergy.
And so, once our video is done, and our video is not a traditional video, it's really geared towards that. And, when I'll send it to you so you can see it. And, you have a podcast, so I guess
we can put the link up in the show notes and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
No problem at all.
Okay.
No problem at all. Definitely about to helping people. Last question. You launched Artist in the 90s.
Yeah.
Very, very successful artist. And you work, jazz artists, you do catalog work, all of that stuff. How is it, what are your thoughts on launching Artist now, 20 plus years later, and how much the music industry has changed? Do you think it's more difficult? Do you think it's easier? What are your thoughts now that you're kind of in the mix with this?
I think it's both, and ironically, you're here today because I've been, as the young people like to say, on one recently. Because I signed a group that just has some fantastic songs that'll probably never come out because they can't get along.
Damn.
And I ironically just talked to Layla yesterday morning, and we were talking about when we were coming up, that just getting in the studio was a luxury. You had two ways to get in the studio when we were coming up. Either a studio owner gave you studio time for free on spec that he would get a back in because he believed in what you were doing, or you paid for it. That was it. Mm-hmm. Now, you have an iPhone, you can make a beat. You go on YouTube.
And a video.
Right, and a video. You can make a beat. So the value, I don't think they see the same value in doing it that we did as business people and the artist did. There was a lot of value just to being able to do a song, let alone have a song distributed. You have CD Baby and TuneCore, SoundCloud. SoundCloud, you can put your music up for free. TuneCore CD Baby's under $100, and you can get your music distributed. And that's why there's 20,000 songs that come out every day. Now, granted, that 20,000 is across on genres. It's not just R&B or hip hop.
Right.
It's across our genres. But the fact that anyone can just have a song distributed in an instant now, and so the value isn't there anymore. Now, so I think that creates a certain level of laziness. But at the same time, there are those that work hard, and they do all the things that are necessary, whether it's tweeting, Instagramming, Instagram stories, Facebook, getting out there doing shows, doing shows in the backyard barbecue, whatever it is, putting stuff up on YouTube every week, whatever it is they have to do. There are those that get out there and really, really work hard. And I think the same thing, the cream rises to the top. So it's, good and bad. You have access to music that you might never have had. Artists have access to distribution where it was very hard back in the day, but now the competition's even more, so you got to work even harder. With that being said, my biggest thing that I say when I speak at conferences is there's multiple ways to get to 9. So just because I say you got to do all this hard work and do all these things doesn't mean it's the only way to get there. There's all sorts of ways to get there.
Got you. I appreciate your time. I know you don't do a lot of interviews at all.
I don't.
So yeah. I definitely appreciate you.
Of course.
You having me, and this was great, man. Learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. You're always involved in something successful. So
let's try to keep it going a little while longer.
Most definitely. We appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate you supporting us. Make sure you follow on Day One Radio. That is DAY, the number 1 Radio. And if you are in Atlanta or you want to push the ballots a little bit, vote for us. We're a finalist for Best Podcast and Creative Loafing. So make sure you go on there and vote. And we'll see you next week with another dope show. Peace.